students. Yesterday we were going over. I just began talking about my trip to Kenya and Tanzania, and the first reflection I shared was about the standard of living there. So I hope to finish this trip in this session, and then continue with other countries in the next two sessions. And I was unable to show this video last time, right? So this is something that I would like to show right now. So, like I was saying yesterday,
Egyptian technology?
I didn't mention it was Egyptian technology, but that's what there's. But I was mentioning that water is hard to come by, right? So there's no running water, and you have to collect water from wells. And this brother's house had a well here, and at a pretty advanced well where you can actually spin it. Right. And without this contraption, you would have to pull it by hand, right?
It's okay. I need to take a shower anyway. Sweating to take a shower.
That well was about, I would say, 30 feet deep.
When did you take
Yeah.
this one?
This year.
This year? New.
New, it's new.
How much you spent?
You can't even see the soil is still wet. The last bit was done yesterday.
This is a brand new well for them. Okay. I wonder where Preacher Hong is. Okay. So even though the living conditions there were, of course, very different from what we have here in the United States, once you go there, after a few days, you just get used to it.
Imagine if
Right. And to me, it was kind of like an extending camping trip.
Rachel tried to
I just kind of thought of it in that way. Yeah. Sometimes there wasn't water to take showers, so
old man
good thing.
do like this.
Yes.
How long is this?
Good thing. A brother had recommended to me that you should bring some wet wipes, like kind of for babies, but and it's really useful when you can't take a shower. You just use one for your face and then one for the rest, right? And because it's also really dusty, but that's all kind of really you don't think about it too much after you get used to it. So even though the living standards were pretty low, but in the end, I would love to go back, right? And in September this year, I'll be going to West Africa, so I look forward to that trip too. I'm not sure if it's exactly the same like in Kenya, but I'm sure it's similar. Yeah, I think it's possible. Yeah, that's why they have that. Yeah. Also, another thing that they didn't have much of were paved roads. I didn't realize how important paved roads were until this trip, and I'll share a testimony a little bit later on about that. All right, so just even like paved roads here in the U.S., wherever you see them, it's a blessing. It's a very big blessing. As a theological student and as a full-time minister, our living allowance is not that high, right? But that said, going there, I felt so rich. I felt so rich. I had like a flashlight that I bought on Amazon.com. It was like $3, and it looked kind of high-tech, right? But it was kind of small, LED, had 3 modes, right? And when I brought it there, the Kenyan brother was saying, "Whoa, looks like it's from the CIA," right? Yeah. And then I was like, okay, it's only $3 too, $3 flashlight. So, yeah, and then our mobile phones, a lot more advanced than what they have. right? Things that we have here that we take for granted, many places in the world are luxuries, very, very luxurious. Even I would say the poorest people in America are richer than many places in the world. So let us not take all these blessings for granted, right? We have so many resources, we have so many opportunities here, and for education and then to travel. Let's not use it just for ourselves, right? We have to use it for the kingdom of God. Be willing to lower ourselves to a different standard even, right? For the sake of the kingdom of God. Okay, next I'd like to talk about a second reflection about God's amazing creation. Psalms 19 verse 1 reads, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork." And then another verse in Proverbs 6 verse 6, "Go to the ant, you sluggard, consider her ways and be wise." Life here in the United States, and I'm sure in Canada and elsewhere too, it's very modernized in the sense that we are interacting with technology and like screens every single day, right? And I think going to a place like Tanzania and Kenya is a good way to reconnect with nature and see and notice God's amazing creation. I mean, I remember playing a lot outside when I was younger, right? I liked to play with ants and bugs and stuff. And when I went to Kenya, I was able to kind of go back to those days, and I'll show you some things there. But just in general, it was amazing to see the scenery there. Right? Here are a few pictures. On the top left, I think is a sunset in Tanzania. Top right is Kenya. It's very green, right? Maybe greener than you might think. That's a region called Kisii. The bottom left is just the vast sky, right, in Tanzania. The bottom right is a sunset I saw in western Kenya, in Kamwala. Okay. And here on the top left here, that's an anthill. It's over 8 feet tall. Okay, no, maybe over 7 feet tall. Over 7 feet tall. Because I also took a picture next to this anthill, and it's taller than me, and I'm about 6 feet. Right? I was amazed. I didn't know that anthills could be that big. You can see there was a lot of fruit when you walk around. It's more of an agricultural society, especially away from the city. Some flowers, and then the bottom right is, I only brought a small camera, but I tried to capture the stars, but you can kind of see some. No, I can't see anything. In the real picture, you can see some stars, yeah. On the top left, there's some caterpillars. Top right, just goats just walking around everywhere, even in the city. Bottom left, it's a chicken that I caught. Yeah. It was in a member's house. And then the bottom right was a pig that was right next to a member's house too. Like you're kind of today, like what kind of animals do you see on a daily basis? You rarely see much of anything, right? Maybe some birds, maybe ants here, right? But you hardly see the items that we eat, right? Like chicken. And when I was there, it was also the first time I witnessed them killing a chicken, right? Because I grew up here in America. I never witnessed. How many of us have witnessed? Okay, some of you guys. Okay, that's good. Yeah, and we later ate that chicken for dinner, right? Yeah. So it was very interesting. Right? In Tanzania, there was a type of ant species. There are many type of ant species I saw, but there's one that was so cool. Right? There's a type of ants. Later, I looked it up in Google. I think they're called metabile ants, right? And one day while there wasn't service, we were waiting maybe for the meal. I was walking along I was just walking there near the house we were staying in between the chapel and the house. And I saw this huge parade of ants going out into the field, like a huge highway of ants like this, right? And then I just stopped and noticed like all these ants were going someplace. Maybe about like 20 minutes later, I saw the same line of ants coming back, but almost every single one of them came back with some part of a termite. They totally like thrashed a termite colony, right? So I'll show you, if you notice, when you look at this video, notice what's in their mouth. It's kind of a reddish color. Those are termite parts. And these ants also were really interesting because if you were to mess with them, they make this noise, very interesting noise. It's kind of like this shh sound, right? They're about a centimeter. Yeah. So I was really amazed by these. That's why I even looked it up while I was there on this phone I had. I didn't have a smartphone at the time. It was just a flip phone, but I was able to access like kind of text internet. Yeah. Here is also something pretty interesting. There is a insect underneath this trap, okay? And I did this for all of us here, right? I threw an ant in there. But watch how this ant cannot escape. And I think what this type of insect does eventually is it just tires out the prey and then eats it. Okay. Okay. This is something pretty interesting too. You might have seen this before, but I think for myself it was the first time. Yeah, pretty amazing. And then one day we were staying over a member's house, and they had a cat, and the cat kept rubbing against our feet, and it was pregnant. And then amazing, because we only stayed there for one night. The next morning, there were kittens. And because the cat slept under my bed that night. And I remember hearing these noises, and I didn't know what they were. And when I woke up, I was like, oh, she was giving birth. So I think, yeah, it was really amazing just to reconnect with God's creation in a way, right? So I think today in our modern society, it's also good to take breaks, right? Take breaks, go hiking, reconnect with God through his creation. I'd like to also talk about a third reflection on East African culture. Right? Acts chapter 17, verse 22 says, I perceive that in all things you are very religious. And then another verse I'm quoting is, I have become all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. So what I noticed when I went to Kenya and Tanzania is that they're very religious countries. They're very Christianized countries. So in the transportation that we were taking, you can see a lot of them, they like to give this is called a matatu, right? What I mentioned yesterday. They like to give it a name, right? So things like God's power, right? And like salute to God. And there's all other ones like disciples or maybe some Swahili ones too, right? I forgot, but every single one has a kind of a Christian theme. There were some Muslim ones too, so there's a few Muslim ones there. And so in general, it's very easy to talk to anybody there about Jesus Christ. So much easier than in the United States. Right? Very easy, because in the United States, religion kind of is a little bit of a taboo subject in a way, right? Especially, you just don't really talk about it in public. But in places like Kenya and Tanzania, it's so easy to talk about Christ. So here on the bottom left, this is Brother George. We were at like a bus station, and we bought some drinks from this guy in the middle. Right? And then after we bought some drinks from them, we just started talking and preaching to him. Right? Just preaching to him, yeah. Here on the bottom right, we were at a hardware store buying supplies for a church construction. And then Preacher Huang here is just talking to one of the clerks at the store about, I think he was talking about the 10 Commandments with her because she was cohabiting with her man, right? Okay. So it was very easy to talk to them about the Bible. There's a story that I don't know if you've heard of. It's a quotation from Desmond Tutu. He's from South Africa. He said, when the missionaries came to Africa, they had the Bible and we had the land. Then they said, let us pray. We closed our eyes. When we opened them, we had the Bible and they had the land. Yeah. So indeed, this part of Africa is very Christianized. On the top left here is a picture, but the most important thing here is this part. Okay, football is huge there, right? So what I found out when I was preaching is that using football analogies were very useful, because everyone could identify with it. Right? On the bottom left here is just kind of to show, like many of our members, they are, especially in the countryside, they are farmers. So here they're planting corn. Top right, just to give you an idea of, I wish I had a better picture, a better idea of what we were eating there. This is kind of like in Chinese, kind of like 葱油饼, but no 葱. Right? It's called chapati. And here is some green beans and rice. Normally, what the other members they were eating is mostly beans. Okay, beans. And a typical staple of their meals is something that they would make out of corn. They would grind corn, mix it with water, and then cook it somehow. So it looks kind of like mashed potato, but the texture, it tastes more sandy. Okay, and that's called ugali. Right? And usually they would eat with their hands, so they would take a little bit of ugali, make an indent with their thumb, and then scoop some beans or whatever with some sauce and then eat it like that. And then there's a lot of sweet potato there. And then this vegetable, I'm not sure what kind of vegetable it is. I think it's something close to kale. But that was the main vegetable that we ate there. There's only like 2 or 3 vegetables you could choose from. Well, not that we chose, but I mean like in general. And then we ate a lot of that. And it's fine. It's good. I really like the food there. On the bottom right is one of our members. He has a motorcycle, and a lot of people in Africa, they drive people for their living. And so on his mud flap, he put, the Truth Saves in TJC, right? Yeah. So that was very cool to see. There in East Africa, the kind of like the official language that people would use in at least, I think, 5 countries is Swahili. So the 3 brothers that I was talking about in Kenya, they all speak Swahili, but they also speak their local dialect. And since they are from the Luo tribe, they speak Luo. Right? In Kenya, I think there's over 30 different types of tribes. Most of our members come from the Luo tribe, Luo. But there's also members from other tribes too. And here on the top left is a picture of Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. So you might have sang some Swahili songs before. Does Mungu sound familiar? Mungu means God. Right? And then here, Maji. Maji means water. Okay. This is how you would say True Jesus Church in Swahili. Kanisa la Kweli la Yesu. And then here on the left side is kind of a picture of the New Testament table of contents. And what you'll notice is that, if you can see, I know this is very small, but for something like Romans, right? The word is warumi, right? When you have a wa in front of a noun, I think, it means it's plural. So Romans, right? But if it's just one Roman, you would use the prefix M. So it'd be marumi, right? So everywhere we went, because we have lighter skin, right? All these kids, they'd be like, Mazungu, which means white man, right? How are you? That's what they would say. Mazungu, how are you? Right? Yeah. And then on the bottom right, that's Samuel in Swahili. So sometimes I would just introduce myself with Samueli because they know it better. Right? So I think wherever we go, we should try to adapt to the culture, especially if it doesn't contradict with truth. Right? Try to learn the languages, the customs, etc., and then use it to your advantage. So because they were very religious in nature, just everywhere you go, you should just preach. I was occasionally in the matatus, you just share the gospel with the person sitting next to you. Right? So on one occasion, we were in Tanzania in Mwanza, and I was sitting in the daladala there, and then there was an elderly person, and I gave him the 5 basic doctrines card to him. Right? I was saying, I'm a missionary from the United States, and this is our basic doctrines. He was Catholic, and then he was just really happy to talk to somebody who was a foreigner maybe, and he was using English with me. But then next to him was a lady, and this lady, when she saw me pass this card to my neighbor, she was like, hey, can I have one too? So I gave her one. And when she was reading it, then she called somebody in the front of the daladala who happened to be her husband. And then he was a preacher in the Seventh-day Adventist church there. Right? So eventually we gave him one and copied down his contact information. So because we went to Mwanza twice, right? Once going to Shinyanga and once going back from Shinyanga, we followed up with him the second time we were there. I actually spoke about 45 minutes with him, with another brother Brother Paul, while the others were doing something else, right? And in the end, I mean, it didn't work out because he was saying, I'm not going to change from my denomination. But you could just see, like, there's so many opportunities that can happen so easily when you preach. You just preach and you just talk about it. Of course, in our various countries, we have to adapt, right? And what I think has been most successful here in the United States is personal evangelism. So personal evangelism is like you preach to people that you already know, you already have established a relationship with, that you're friends with, people that there's already trust involved, right? Because generally we're very wary of people who are strangers and are trying to sell us something, right? That's how we are. That's our culture. We're very suspicious. But when we already have a connection with people, we have to take advantage of that connection, right? And deepen that connection. And as we live out our life, I think very naturally, your faith should come up, right? And that's when you can introduce them to what you believe and what you believe. Okay. So every place is different. The next reflection I'd like to share about is that when I was there, I really felt like every day was under the grace of God. Because I remember writing emails back home, both to Joyce, my wife, and then to my family. And it's rare. It was rare. It's rare for me to write. I usually don't use like things like I don't use the grace of God apart from a greeting, right? Usually. But then I remember as I was writing those emails, a lot of times I would be writing, thanks to God's grace, right, for his protection. Every day is under the grace of God. Because I really felt that. Because when I got there, I realized that Kenya, and especially Nairobi, isn't very safe, right? Because before I went to Kenya, I didn't have time to really do any research or reading about the places we would visit. I didn't even get an itinerary of what we were going to do yet. Usually the itinerary is kind of set when we get there anyway. And so I was kind of clueless going into it. So when I was in Nairobi, I realized that it's very dangerous. And even the locals, they would carry their backpacks in front of them, right? Just to avoid pickpocketing. And especially if you're a foreigner and you don't have dark skin, you are basically targeted. You feel people when they see you, they think you have money, right? So they might try to do something, right? So here is on the top left. This is on the way to Kariobangi Church. It's about a mile walk from the public transportation where they drop people off, because it's a village area. And I remember one night during our worker seminar there, it was already dark. And the three local brothers who were accompanying us, they were escorting us back to the city where we were staying. We weren't staying in the church because there weren't beddings, right? So we stayed in a hotel in the city. This hotel is it's not a hotel, it's like a 0-star motel, right? Yeah. And so they were escorting us back. And when we came out of the church and walked onto the pathway, I was oblivious to it because we had just gotten there. It was like maybe the second or third day. And there were apparently two people who were trying to get in the way of Preacher TK, right? But because later they noticed that there were the local Kenyans around, they decided to just walk aside, right? So that's why I mentioned that those three Kenyan brothers, they're in a way our guides, our translators, but also our bodyguards, because they're always looking out for us and seeing like if there's any suspicious activity going on. Right? So when we got to the area where the matatus pick up people, Brother George, like he noticed that there was this guy, like standing really close to us, right? And then he left, right? And then Brother George was telling me, like, oh, thank God that guy left, right? Because be careful of people who seem to be too friendly, right? But then he came back. And then when the right matatu came, because I think each of them have numbers for the route that they're going to take, this stranger was saying, hey, get into this one, right? But then Brother George, I think because he has seen a lot of these type of things before, he was like, no, let's not get into that one. He was afraid that this guy had already colluded with the driver and perhaps something would happen, right? So at the very last minute, instead of going to that matatu, we decided to go to another one and just sat down. And then later we went off. So it was kind of things like this that made me realize that, wow, it's pretty insecure there. Right. On the bottom right, this is a news article that I was reading on my flip phone. There's no pictures though, right? But this is what I read. Because after our 7 days in Nairobi, we took that overnight bus to Tanzania. And there was a stop in a place called Narok. It was a pit stop where you can go to the bathroom. And I was like, okay, we're in Narok. I didn't know anything, so I just Google Narok, right? And like the second item was like, Kenya bus crash kills 41 near Narok, right? And I was reading like, they were descending from the mountain, and then the thing is, the roads there, there's no dotted lines, there's no metal guards on the side, so it's not very safe. So apparently this bus crash just a month earlier than when I was there. It just happened, right? And I was reading, oh man, wow, this could very well happen, and right here too. And I was realizing that every day is under the grace of God. Right? When we were in Nairobi too, there is a neighborhood called East Lee. Right? So one day we were going from our hotel in this downtown to go to our church in Githurai, right? And we had to pass through East Lee. I'm not sure if this is the right route we took, but that's according to Google Maps, right? But we had to pass through East Lee. And I was sitting next to Brother George. And Brother George, after we had passed East Lee, he was saying, he kind of like sighed. And he was saying like, I'm really glad that we passed through East Lee without any incident. Because he was saying that that's a neighborhood where there's a lot of Somalian immigrants. And some of Somalians in general are Muslim. And then of course some of the Muslims, they belong to a terrorist group called Al-Shabaab. Right? And then they had been known to throw bombs into buses and matatus that were passing through East Lee, kind of in retaliation for Kenyan troops being in Somalia trying to dissolve Al-Shabaab, right? So when he was telling me about that, I was like, oh wow, it's pretty dangerous here. And we had already passed the neighborhood, so I was like, I didn't know where we were talking about. But on our way back, then he was sitting somewhere else, and then he looked at me, and then he's like, he just nodded, and I was like, at first I was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about now, right? Yeah. So thank God, nothing happened there. But when we were in Tanzania, about the second or third day in, I was on my flip phone, and I was reading the BBC headlines. And then I saw that there was a mall attack in Nairobi. And so when we went to buy some supplies in the city, there was a TV there, and you can see, if you can make this out, Westgate under siege. That was, Westgate refers to the neighborhood and the mall where where Al-Shabaab, they went and attacked the mall there. And I think over 60-some people died that day. I mean, we didn't shop in that mall, and that area is probably one of the more posher areas in Nairobi. But still, I think if it had happened while we were in Nairobi, it would have been very chaotic, and to move about in the city is very difficult already. And with that happening, I think it would have been chaos. Right? So again, once that happened, that really shocked me because I was thinking, we were just there. But thanks to God's grace that we didn't face any type of trouble in that sense. Yeah. I'd like to share this one particular incident too that I really felt God helped us in. We took, when we were in Tanzania, in Shinyanga, we took a almost 2-hour motorcycle ride to a remote area to visit members called Ikonda. That was the church that I had showed you before. Sorry. The one with the mud pews. Yeah, this one on the bottom right. This is Ikonda. This is the church we were visiting. And it was in a very remote area, and the motorcyclists were kind of amazing because there's no signs to this place, right? And then they kind of know the area, and then they just go by sense, right? So they don't, I think it's near those mountains, so we're just going to go to the mountains. So 4 of us went. So 2 motorcyclists, me and Preacher Huang, and then a Kenyan brother, and then a younger Tanzanian brother, because he knew the place. Right? He knew the place. So we went, and on the way to that place, I was with Brother Boniface, the local Kenyan brother. He was behind me, and he was telling me on the way there that if it rains, it's really you can't go through here at all because you cannot go through here at all. It's completely muddy and you'll get stuck, right? And after we finished our service and we're about to go home, it started to rain, right? So this is yeah, if there's mud, you can't move. Right? So we decided to just give it a try. It was already like 4 in the, I don't know how, maybe 3 in the afternoon. We decided to give it a try. So the motorcyclists, they drove us. We got maybe like 200 meters, 300 meters. And then the mud got stuck into the mud flap, the mud guard. Right? Yeah, there's a mud guard here, right? And then it wouldn't make the wheel rotate, so then the motorcycle was stuck. Right? So we decided to walk, right, ahead while the motorcyclist caught up to us. Right? While we were walking, it started to hail. I think you can kind of see some of the hail, right? It started to hail. But we started to walk ahead and try to find some shelter while the motorcyclists were still cleaning their things. Right? And it stopped hailing, so we started to just walk. And you can get a sense of how muddy it is. Just notice the feet, okay? There's about 1 inch or 2 inches of mud. I was talking to the camera. And walking on the straw there didn't help either. No, I tried too. So eventually we got to, it started raining harder again, right? So we saw like a couple of houses there, so we decided to take shelter there. And we decided, you know what, we probably have to stay overnight in Ikonda Church, right? Because there's no way we can get home. So we decided to walk back towards the church. On our way back towards the church, we ran into the motorcyclists, and we were asking them, I think we had to stay back. We had to stay overnight here. But they were so insistent. They're like, no, we can go back today. We can go back today, right? And then they were busy, trying to clean their motorcycles. You could see just like every 200 meters, we had to get off and clean. So it was really not working.
We got stuck. It rained again, a hailstorm. Picky pickies are stuck in the mud.
Oh, the motorcyclists are called picky pickies. Okay, so we tried about like 5-6 times. Getting on the motorcycle and then getting off, cleaning, repeat 5-6 times. And then we stopped at a place. You see how remote this is, right? And we were near these houses, and we decided to ask. We knew that we had to remove that mud guard. That was key. That was the key. So, but we needed a wrench, and no one had a wrench. So when we got stuck for that 5th or 6th time, we went to knock on a door and just see, do you have a wrench? And thanks to God's grace, they had a wrench the exact right size, And we removed the mud guard, and thankfully, at that time, the sun had already set, and we were able to go back a lot more smoothly, right? Of course, mud was kind of hitting our face now, but thank God, we were able to get back to the church around like 9:30, right? 9:30. And the motorcyclists going back home, they had to go by sense in the dark. I don't even know how they are able to navigate, right? So thanks to God's grace, we got back, yeah. So this is just kind of a recap, some pictures here, yeah. Okay. At this time, I would like to, maybe I should just recap my trip in Kenya and Tanzania. There's more I could share, but I think overall what I wanted to share is that I got a lot more from the trip than I felt like I gave to them, So I think if you do have an opportunity to go on a trip like this, I think it's worthwhile. It's worthwhile to go and experience it for yourself and realize kind of the life of a missionary too. Right? So if you would like to go to Africa, I think the requirements that you do have to complete NYTS, right? Or you can go to a program in London every year called the African Ministry Committee Volunteer Training Program, I think, right? That's in January every year, right? Which is kind of focused on African ministry. There's also now a African ministry, like religious education ministry program, because they also need help with religious education. And I think if you were able to go on a trip like this, it's very meaningful. I think there's a couple of older members here that have been on these trips, and I think they all say the same thing. That even though like it's very tough conditions or tougher conditions, but they would go again. I would go again, and experience it again. Right? One thing I wasn't able to put into the slideshow, but I also share too, is that when I was in Kenya, you're able to also see a lot of spiritual phenomena, right? In a church that we were baptizing in, Kamwala Church, I showed a picture of that, right? There were about 41 people that were baptized that day because missionaries hadn't been sent there for a while. Preacher Huang and I were baptizing. Right? I was able to baptize because Preacher Huang sent me to baptize. And while we were baptizing these members, 3 of them, right, came up out of the water speaking in tongues, right? And they had received the Holy Spirit while coming out of the baptism. And I witnessed that with my own eyes, right? So that was a very powerful experience to just confirm the efficacy of the baptism in the True Jesus Church, right? Of course, baptism is not to receive the Holy Spirit like in that exact moment. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to wash away our sins. But sometimes when you're baptized in the true baptism, right, you can also receive the Holy Spirit, evidenced by speaking in tongues. So that was very powerful. We also saw people like possessed too, right? In prayer, they would fall and faint. And there's this one lady I remember very clearly. It gave me like goosebumps because at the end of the prayer, she was just on the floor, like almost dead, right? And then we were trying to lift her up, right? And even though she looked like lifeless, she was crying and crying, right? And as we were lifting her up, she almost was able to stand on her own power. But then all of a sudden, she started laughing, from crying to laughing, right? And when that happened, I just got goosebumps because it was really strange. And then she fell back down, right? And then Preacher Huang had to cast out demons, right? And eventually we were able to talk to her soberly. She was clear-minded. And the problem there was because she thought that when she prayed to God, that this definitely had to happen each time. She thought that was regular, right? So in a way, she had opened her heart to all these types of spirits that were causing her to fall, even lose consciousness and not be able to control herself. So things like this were also very edifying for me to see. Okay. Now I'd like to switch gears a little bit. This kind of completes my sharing on Kenya and Tanzania. If you have any questions for me, you can always approach me at another time. But now I'd like to switch into talking about Argentina and Dominican Republic. But before that, I have to give a presentation from the Spanish Ministry Committee. Okay. Everyone, I think, have received this email about a subsidized Spanish language learning program. Basically, the USGA is trying to promote Spanish speaking, right? Because there's a lot of work to be done in Central and South America and Latin America, right? And we do also have churches in some of these countries. So not all, obviously not all, but there's so much potential there. So there's two programs that they're trying to promote. One is a reimbursement program, right? So I would like to now use their presentation that they gave me to show to you. Okay, so why do we want to study Spanish? Why is it very beneficial? There are approximately 414 million people who speak Spanish as a native language. Right? This is as of 2010. And Spanish is the official language in 20 countries. And you can see the bulk of them are here in the Western Hemisphere. So because of Spain and their position in history, they conquered a lot of these lands before, and then the language was passed on here. So you can see that especially these darker areas, they all speak Spanish. In the United States, you can see that many states also have Spanish-speaking populations. Right? So also, worldwide, it is the second most spoken language in terms of its number of native speakers. Third most spoken language by a total number of Third most spoken language by total number of speakers after Mandarin and English. Okay. And then Spanish is the most popular second language by native speakers of American English. Okay, so it is very useful. Here is just also a map showing the number of Spanish speakers. Even Brazil, even though it's not the official language, it also has more than 1 million Spanish students speaking. Yeah. Here in the United States, it's a lot of us live in California. Some of us live in Texas. We have people living here in Arizona, Florida too, right? And then even in the East Coast, New York, New Jersey, there's also a lot of Spanish speakers. So it's a very useful language to learn. And why do we want to pick up second languages, right? It's because Jesus Christ has told us, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. And we need to preach to the end of the earth. Okay? Of course, that starts here at home and then expands outward. So here in the United States, we have been trying to promote a Spanish ministry. Okay? Even though we're an English-speaking country, we're still trying to promote Spanish-speaking. There's a few reasons, right? Currently, we have churches in Argentina and Dominican Republic, right? And then we have some members scattered in like Bolivia, Ecuador, Guatemala, Chile too. Right? We have a church in Chile. The thing is that many of them are immigrants to those countries, and their second generation did not have an opportunity to study in their country, especially in like Argentina, which I'll talk about probably next time. Right? They had to work. They had to go straight to work in their parents' business. So their Spanish level is not that good either, right? But here in the United States, and I'm sure for Canada too, right? The youth here have better opportunities to get education, right? And also to learn Spanish. And so because the USGA is assigned to take care of the Central and South America too, there is a great need for Spanish speakers. So the USGA has established a Spanish ministry committee, and its main focus is on evangelism to Spanish-speaking people. And we need the language in order to evangelize. So here in the United States, for the last several years, we have been trying to do here in the Southwest region, Spanish hosannas, right? Mostly it's been English preacher and then Spanish translation, right? But hopefully we can eventually do just straight Spanish evangelism. Also in Dominican Republic, every year we try to do something more evangelical in nature. I just came back from a trip that was more evangelical in nature. And that requires Spanish-speaking ability. Right? So that's why the USGA is trying to encourage this a little bit more by promoting two things. Right? First is the subsidized Spanish language learning program. It's to provide TJC members with opportunity to learn and increase their command of Spanish language in order to contribute further to the Spanish ministry. And you need to be baptized for 3 years, have a good standing in the church, and interested in dedicating yourself in the Spanish ministry. And what will happen is that in your current university or college coursework, right, the USGA will reimburse up to 50% or up to $500, whatever is lower, right, for your Spanish language classes. Of course, compared to some places' tuition, it's not much, but it is a little bit of an incentive, right? Of course, the church can't cover everything, but it's just to give us a little bit of a push in this direction. And the USGA is willing to reimburse up to 2 semesters or quarters per person of your classes, right? And you must complete it with a B or higher in order to get this reimbursement. So then after you complete it, you would complete the class, you would complete one of these reimbursement forms, and then the USGA will help subsidize your education in this way. Okay. And another program is the online Spanish language learning program. If some of us are already graduates from university, and we're not in college, there's another way that I think this SMC, the Spanish Ministry Committee, have tried to promote is an online course. I think it's a type of software, and it'll be provided to you for free, and you learn at your own pace. And in order to apply for this, you need to apply by August 17th, and then it will start in September. Okay. So if you're interested, please email the Spanish Ministry Committee, smc@tjc.org, smc@tjc.org. And when you join these programs, right, there's a expected commitment, okay, as suggested, right? But because you are, so it's hoped that you can join 3 Dominican Republic missionary trips within 6 years, right? This is the ones in the ones that are evangelical in nature. Usually it happens every July. And then also commit yourself to 3 other Dominican Republic missionary trips, the ones that are not held in July, basically. Right, so basically hopefully you can go 6 times in 6 years. And if you can, to support the English-Spanish Hosanna evangelical services. And if there are Spanish Bible studies, whether online or in your local church, to help support them. Okay. So this is what the USGA has been trying to promote. Hopefully more youth can understand the need for languages, especially something like Spanish, to further the gospel. I also hope that after I make my presentations on Argentina and Dominican Republic, it can also give you more interest in learning Spanish. So finally, to conclude this presentation, it is a verse that I've also said yesterday, right? The harvest truly is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore pray the Lord of harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. So Spanish is one such way that we can make our efforts. But if you have education in other languages, continue to pursue them too, right? Because languages are so important wherever we go to communicate the faith in Jesus Christ. So this will conclude today's session. Again, if you have any questions for me about Kenya and Tanzania, feel free to ask me in the break times. I will continue next time with Argentina and then Dominican Republic. Let's now conclude with a silent prayer.